Hey everyone, Georgie here with Global Matters. I had the following video recorded during one of my update streams, but I never posted it. But I still think that the topic is quite interesting about what US can learn from the conflict in Ukraine. Therefore, I hope you enjoy watching it and please leave your comment about what you think. I want to talk about this specific paper. I made a very loud claim about how US generals are shaking in their boots, and people were wondering what I had in mind. And it was this. Obviously, it was a phrase of speech. No one is shaking in their boots. It's all fine. But this is one of the interesting papers that I've read recently, and I suggest everyone reading it if you want. But I'm gonna cover it in very short form here. It's just a 10 pager, so it's not a very long read, not very hard read, but it evaluates what's the situation that Western armies and specifically US military finds themselves, and what kind of lessons does the war in Ukraine teaches us. Because there are certain lessons that do underline the weakness of the Western military in the 21st century warfare. The paper talks about how wars have been developed, how the doctrine of US have been developing, that after the Vietnam War, the military and the concept of the military that was used back then was then looked after the Israeli conflict during the Yom Kippur War, and how US military started adapting, and it allowed over decades to build a new type of US military. And the authors of the paper are drawing their attention that right now there are certain lessons from Ukrainian war that we can and should use in our militaries in the West to make sure we adapt to the new style of warfare. They go into the underlying the idea that historically we've seen countries that had large armies and were very confident in their armies were actually not ready for the modern warfare, where we would see whenever there is an actual challenge with some kind of a potential peer opponent. It's never said openly in the paper, but I think everyone can agree that if there is any kind of open conflict with China, Russia, Iran axis, then there would be certain, like a peer opponent style opposition in there. And what the authors of the paper want to underline is that this opposition with a peer opponent can leave us vulnerable because we might not be ready to that type of operations. Most of our current experiences and doctrines and the ways that our armies operate, mostly I'm focusing on US, but other countries as well, is that over multi-decade operations against doing the counterinsurgency operations or anti-terrorist wars have funneled us into believing how wars should work. We have prepared platforms that are showing that they're extremely vulnerable to the kind of warfare that Ukraine is experiencing right now. One of the major weaknesses that is underlined is that in this new era of highly precise weapons with high degree of intelligence available on the battlefield, then the doctrine of having a centralized major hub for command and operations that is exposed to open is very much under threat. If you have your central operation with satellite dishes, with equipment, it's like a light in the dark. It's easy to see and it's easy to find. And with the precise weaponry, long range precise weaponry that right now we are having on the battlefield, or we're seeing on the battlefield, it wouldn't take that much to strike that. And that the lesson that we first and foremost should learn from Ukraine is that having smaller command operations and having mobile command operations is proving to be a lot more valuable. Secondly, the question on the rigidity of command. What Ukraine has been showing is something, I believe it was Milley actually, Mark Milley, that described the concept of um, disciplined disobedience, where there needs to be a facilitation and trust that needs to be elevated in our current militaries to allow for a larger degree of autonomy and allow our units of different scale to make their own decisions. We've seen this at some level, but in our Western militaries at a higher level, the command structure is still rigid. So having, for example, like in Ukraine, where certain brigades are operating without there, that's why we're seeing some brigades that are not part of the bigger unit composition. Sorry for not remembering the right names. But the point is that having bigger units that would operate more independently and having more power to make their own decisions would require us to have this framework be taught so our leaders are more competent and we are less dependent on the rigid structure, but more when we can communicate what we just need to achieve, what is the goal, and what are the boundaries of that goal to be achieved at, and then essentially give more freedom to even larger size units to adapt and how they want things to be executed. And right now, it's not always there. Then the next thing is very, very important, which is the depth of personnel of Western militaries. I'm not discovering America here, if I can make that expression, but we are having armies and militaries that are very, very small compared to certain militaries of the world. When we're looking at replenishment rates and casualty rates at the war in Ukraine, they are enormous compared to whatever US and the allies have lost during the decades of insurgency, counterinsurgency wars. It's not even close. What the authors mention in the paper is that the infantry individual ready reserve in US in 1973 was 700,000 people. Right now, it's 76,000 people. That is almost tenfold reduction in the reserve capabilities. And they're talking very specific numbers of the casualty replenishment rate. And they're stating that if we go into the prolonged conflict where there would be certain level of attrition with a high level and intensity of attrition that, for example, Ukraine is experiencing, even if there is less casualties than Ukrainian casualties we have right now, there might still be there. We in the Western militaries just don't have the depth of reserves, which makes our sustaining power less capable. We might have really good military, but it just would break too fast, and there would be nothing to replenish it with. The next point is talking about the drone warfare and how the new technologies are influencing the battlefield. And what are they underlining is that we are seeing the cycle of engagement becoming faster. We are seeing that the pace of the battlefield is increasing. It means that from the moment of discovery and contact with the enemy, the time to engagement is shortening. That means both on the individual unit level, we cannot rely anymore on, for example, what we're seeing in the Soviet doctrine at the start of the war, where a group unit would engage other unit, and then Russians would need to wait until their command answers and allows them to engage the unit. Right now, we are seeing those strike capabilities being condensed, where a unit is not only the one that is scouting themselves with the drone technology, it's not only the unit that discovers the enemy, it's not only unit that accumulates that information, it's also the unit that takes decisions and engages the enemy, for example. The shortening of that communication means that whatever was said before about the individuality and decision making is going to be crucial, both on a small unit level, but also if we zoom out and talk about bigger campaign. How does brigade operate? Can they do certain actions without first confirming it with command? And that is extremely, extremely relevant because we do not have time for decision-making process. Because of technology and the processing power of technology and AI, we might have literally minutes. They also want to make sure that private and public partnership, especially with open source intelligence, is going to be very relevant. That we can leverage a lot of capabilities from the public sector. We can leverage a lot of private individuals, production of weapons, production of intelligence, technology, everything like this. This is the best shown by Starlink. Maybe not the best example because everyone remembers that part about the Crimea and that Damascus turned off the satellites connection. But the general principle that technology that was first and foremost designed by to be a civilian technology can and should be leveraged by the militaries. And when we're talking intelligence, then open source intelligence provides a whole new aspect, especially for democratic powers, where we can see that people need to be guided because the enemy is going to utilize information space to build a certain narrative by using certain information from the battlefield. So having open source access to the battlefield information is crucial. Long story short, right now Ukraine is fighting a very bloody war, and they're making a lot of mistakes and they're paying it for them in blood. So what the authors are calling in for this paper is to make sure that we take their blood and their mistakes and learn from it, and that our modern militaries are suited to combat even with peer adversaries, such as China, for example. Thank you so much for watching this, guys. Thank you so much to moderators. Please check out the link for the NATO 69 Sniffing Brigade. We are still doing the donations. We extended the gathering of donations to 32,000, mostly because my salary is going to come up just a bit later and I really want that patch. But also, I know that other people were looking forward to try to get these patches, and now we have plenty of time to run the campaign. Please donate. Let's get that truck to the armed forces of Ukraine. It would be very helpful. Thanks again for watching. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you guys next time.